Welcome to another episode of Follow the Brand TV. I am your host, Grant McGaugh, CEO of 5-Star BDM, a 5-star personal brand and business development company. I want to take you on a journey through another deep dive into the world of personal branding and business development using compelling personal stories, business conversations, and tips to improve your brand. By listening to the Follow the Brand TV series, you will differentiate yourself from the competition and build trust with prospective clients and employers. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Make it one that will set you apart, build confidence, and reflect who you are. Building your 5-star personal brand is a great way to improve your skills and knowledge. If you have any questions for me or any of my guests, please email me at grant.mcgaugh@5starbdm.com. Now, let's begin with our next episode on the Follow the Brand TV.
Five-Star BDM, Brand Development Masters, is a professional consulting and advisory group keenly focused on business development services for the small to mid-sized business and entrepreneurs. Although every business is unique, they often share business development challenges that can be addressed through smart branding. Services include process improvement and operations, digital strategy and transformation, business intelligence, digital marketing, and personal branding. Our business and personal branding company has helped a number of professionals and organizations to optimize and grow. This results in more business, more opportunities, better reach, positive outcomes. Visit www.5starbdm.com today to learn more.
For years, artificial intelligence was a tool, an assistant that followed instructions and stayed within the lines. But now, something fundamental has shifted. AI isn't just generating content or crunching numbers. It's acting on its own, making decisions, and taking steps without waiting for a human prompt. In this episode of Follow the Brand, I sit down with Mark Lind, a leader who's been at the intersection of technology and security for decades. Together, we explore a question that's keeping executives up at night. What happens when AI agents have their own identities? Mark puts it simply: identity is the new perimeter. It's no longer just about what AI can do, but about who controls it, who oversees its actions, and who is responsible when things go wrong. We dive into the risks of autonomy without governance, and why every organization needs to rethink how they manage permissions, monitor activity, and build trust in their AI systems. Technology should amplify human capability, not replace human judgment. If you're an executive being pushed to move faster than your governance can handle, this conversation is for you. Start small, build trust, and scale with discipline. This is Follow the Brand. The Agent Has an Identity with Mark Lind. Watch the full episode now.
Welcome, everyone, to the Follow Brand Podcast. We are going to have a candid conversation today that I think is going to bring a lot of information around agentic AI, which is not just as a buzzword, but as a real force reshaping leadership, cybersecurity, enterprise decision-making when AI systems begin to act, decide, and adapt. And these lead to a lot of questions around trust, around risk, around accountability as we move into, from the lab to the boardroom. So today, my guest is Mark Lind. And Mark Lind is a top 5 globally ranked thought leader in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. He's the head of executive advisory and corporate strategy and a 4-time CIO, CTO, and CISO with over 20 years advising global enterprises. And Mark has been a featured speaker for organizations like Oracle, IBM Watson, Cisco, Intel, and Cohesity, and was an Ernst & Young EY Entrepreneur of the Year finalist. And he's also served in the U.S. Army as a veteran, having served in the 3rd Ranger Battalion and the 82nd Airborne. So I'd like to welcome him to the Follow Brand Podcast. Mark, you'd like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Grant. Thanks for having me on today. Yeah, no, I think you covered it pretty well. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
That is wonderful, wonderful. We're going to jump right in.
Okay.
Because you have, you've been featured a number of different times, and I know I haven't had your entire bio, but I know what you've done. You've been a CIO, CISO multiple times. And I want to ask you, just from that seat, what does most of the market still misunderstand about agentic AI today?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I advise lots of CIOs and CISOs, well over 150 right now, in both private and public sector. And I think one of the things they're trying to figure out is what are my use cases for agentic AI, and is it safe for me to let it be autonomous? And then I think the other thing is it's being driven by cost controls and things like that, where they're wanting to do more with less, especially in the public sector. I hear it over and over and over. How can I do more with less? Well, one of those ways is to automate. And obviously AI, the promise of AI, if you will, and even the greater promise of agentic AI is that automation. And I think where it gets a little confusing for them is, just things like agency, right? If you look at the OWASP, top 10 right now for cybersecurity issues, they already have excessive agency as one of the issues for agentic AI, right? Because they grant them too much for those that have deployed it in production. And so, I think that's one of the things that they have to struggle with. And so a lot of the same questions they had when they did AI are the same ones that they're having with agentic. But on top of that, now they got to decide, is it asynchronous or synchronous? Meaning asynchronous, it's out there on its own. It's making its own decisions. It's fairly autonomous. Synchronous is where kind of like what we do now, where we go inside the LLM and we create something and we run it from time to time and over and over, and it acts as an agent, right? And it does things for us. So there's synchronous and asynchronous, and I think along with some of these other things, there's the typical production issues. Am I going to have person in the middle? What kind of decision making are we going to do? How comfortable and ethical do we believe it is letting it out on its own? And are we worried about excessive agency in cybersecurity with agentic AI?
All of those things are so important. You have to consider all these things and understand that, and I know a lot about agentic AI in the field and what concerns me really is that once you design something and you do put it out in the field, I don't know how flexible it's going to be because the variables always change in the world. They're not always the same. So can the AI, adjust to those variables? I'm not sure. Here's one of the major concerns, and you're probably one of the few people that can actually answer this because you sit in that intersection about what AI agents in cybersecurity, the threat landscape compared to traditional automation like robotic process automation and things like that, or Gen AI tools you just talked about. When you get into an agentic world, how is that going to change the cybersecurity threat landscape?
Well, I think, I think that's a question a lot of people are struggling with, right? Especially in large environments or, financial services, things where healthcare, where things can go wrong. And if they go wrong, it can be very damaging very quickly. And what we're starting to see is there's some really great AI risk frameworks out there. NIST has one, ISO has one. You can just keep going down the list. And they're starting to get a little bit more mature, right? When they first came out, obviously they're just kind of like AI specific standards that everybody would think, more around regulatory and management. But as we start thinking about, like you mentioned, the autonomous growth of these agents as this market matures, we're going to have to figure out, how do I align them with what we're trying to do as an organization? How do I make sure that I have a framework in place to do that? How do I assign permissions, because look, an agent has an identity just like you and I have an identity, right? So it's going to be a lot like an employee. Then also, how do I make sure that we have person in the middle? That's a very important piece, because regardless of what the agent does, there are very few use cases where there isn't some need for oversight, just like you would with a team of employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Oversight, responsibility, accountability is big. You brought up something that we really got to get our heads around, and that's around identity. If the agentic AI model sees itself as an identity. Now, I know you've written that identity is now the new perimeter.
That's right.
And here's the question. Why has identity become the primary attack surface in an AI-driven world?
Mainly because once you have that, you have the keys to the kingdom. You have escalated privileges, you have access. The other thing is that you're able to do work around some of the security tools and platforms they have in place with the identity. That's why a lot of people attack identity. The other thing is if you look at it, everybody's aware that identity just continues to grow in what it covers. A good example of that would be if you look at the Oktas, the pings, I know duos, etc. They're building their use cases around somebody logs in, but if they log in Salt Lake City and then 20 minutes later they log in Shanghai, we have an issue, right?
Yeah.
We have and so also they're able to look at some of their behaviors and what they're doing, right? Behavior analysis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it just continues to grow and expand on how they can secure identity. Think about this now when you have 1 billion or 2 billion or maybe 15 billion, more, twice as many people as there are people on the planet are in agents out there, right? And I don't think that's a very big stretch to think of it like that, because when you look at, just some of the growth that we have in everything else along this journey, like how many people would have thought that they connect with and use 5, 6, 7 clouds a day, which on average they do. Right?
Yeah.
People don't think that way. It'll be the same with agents, right? We're not going to see them necessarily. They're not going to be like right in front of your face, but they're going to be doing things for you. They're going to be helping you along. They're going to be advertising to you. They're going to be tracking you, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if we don't have identity, it's going to be very difficult. Well, with that identity comes that risk that you just asked about, right? Now we have you and I get something, I might have questions about it, and then I might escalate it to the help desk or to our cybersecurity team. How do we know the agent's going to have that same kind of intuition, that same kind of foresight to do that, right? Or to have the historical perspective to understand that that's not normal. What if it only went back 6 months and not 6 years? So there's a lot of moving parts to this, and I think just like everything else, it's a fairly immature space, and so as it matures, we're going to really have to stress robust oversight mechanisms so that the autonomy remains kind of bounded, traceable, and aligned with the business. That's the critical element in my mind.
That's 100% true. Understanding what it is or what capabilities are we giving it. We got to put it in the sandbox. You think about a child, right?
Yes.
A young child, usually you got to put them in the little sandbox, and they're in that world, and they're going to operate in that world, and they can't do too much damage, right? They should be good. But once you take them out of that, and they're in the whole playground, and you're talking about now, like not really watching them, you got to really think about that as we move forward. Which brings me to this next question, because the market asks for speed. The boards, you're a corporate board advisory entity, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Boards want speed, but regulators, they want control. You kind of sit in both of those worlds, right? You understand those conversations. How should executive teams balance innovation with responsibility as these agentic systems scale, like you said, to potentially billions of agents?
Yeah, a perfect, kind of a use case example of that is they want to rush this out. They want to do those things, and a lot of the CIOs and CISOs that I work with are under that pressure today, right? They are. They're either from their competition, from their board, from their investors, or from their employee base. We're seeing it across the board. But you think about how you're going to do that, and I think we go back to that alignment, right? The governance and alignment, and putting that in place with regular, with generative AI. We're worried about things like, model poisoning, prompt injection, having the right guardrails in place, all that. Now take all of that and add in access control for agents. That's a perfect example. So today, in today's world, in identity and in AI, we already see this issue where somebody was in this role and an escalated role. They moved to a different role and it has a different level of permissions, right, and rights. Well, what happens is they never really turn off these, right? They never do. So if you're an employee for 15 years, you got 15 years of multiple different roles, permissions. And that's a big security risk that we have out there now. And then now a bad actor gets access to your identity. Now they have escalated privileges across a whole spectrum of applications and sensitive data. So we have that same problem with agents, right? If you have agents, just think about it now. We have an agent do this now. Then we add a little bit, or we replace that agent, but we don't ever turn that other agent off, which we know happens in IT all the time, right? So, it's access control. So all these things that we have concerns about employees, we have to make sure that we don't just move problems we already have over onto that. Or if we have security controls and access controls in place for that we should apply those to those agents as well. So that's why I keep kind of rolling back to some of the identity and all that is we need to then communicate that to the board, because the last thing they want to do is have a breach, right? Because if every breach that I've had in the last year by somebody that I do business with, I probably got 15 different credit monitoring deals that I can sign up for free because they have to give them to me because they breached my data, right? I get it all the time. Everybody does.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I think that because if you go back to the board and just say, well, we don't have the money, or we're not going to do it, or we don't have the time, or we don't have the right people, that doesn't send the best message about your capability as a leader. But if you go back and with legitimate concerns, and this is what I tell a lot of our CIOs and CISOs that I have these conversations with, I'm like, go back with legitimate concerns and frame it in that it aligns with the mission of the organization. And security, and especially when you can explain it in a frame like that, they understand that. So those take time. So have a little patience. We're going to get there. The other thing is how do we evaluate? This is the other piece that I just had I travel every week, and earlier this week I was with one of the biggest universities in the U.S. and we had a long conversation about this. And one of the things we talked about with agentic AI, one of the concerns is you have to have some way to evaluate it, right? like the NIST AI risk management framework. If you look at Microsoft's framework, if you look at OpenAI's, you can go down the list, ISO, etc. It's a framework, but it doesn't really give you the evaluation criteria. And really, the evaluation criteria is going to be pretty personalized to your organization because it's your mission, and your mission differs than other people's missions, right? And you got to align it with what you're trying to accomplish, what the good corporate goals are. And being able to do that, and then putting that evaluation criteria and where it's placed in against the agents you have in place. Especially, imagine if you're an organization with 700 agents or 10,000 agents. If you didn't have some type of evaluation criteria, some kind of framework, and some kind of way to ensure that they're aligned with the business, can you imagine the chaos?
I'm imagining it all already, the trust layer, right? How do
Oh,
you trust what the information, what it's giving you? You know, you can start getting into that other conversation. So remember, we always remember this. You know, I'm a little older maybe than you, but we used to get the paper. In the paper, you had Spy versus Spy. One of the cartoons would come up.
right,
Spy
right.
versus Spy, right? So now you got AI versus AI. Think about your LLM, right? And now you got a small language model that's proprietary within your organization that you've now deployed. That's your SLM, and it's an AI, right? You got an AI
Yeah.
versus AI. Then you got all these other autonomous agents all operating as well. It becomes kind of a mismatch. Now, even before we jump down this call, I want to get the audience to understand this. I use Zoom a lot. Well, Mark uses WebEx a lot. He had to go through a whole new configuration to get there, just to get to, to a video feed. Think about that when you deploy these AI agents. That are they flexible enough to self-configure like that on the fly? And then in the cybersecurity world, that's what's happening, right? You got spy versus spy. You've got like, hey, I want to get into your data. Hey, I want to get you out of my data, or whatever it may be. What does that scenario look like in your mind?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good topic because Um, I am worried. If you think about generative AI, it's fairly stateless, right? And they have the context window to try to bring some state to it and all that, but we all know that doesn't work fantastic, and it hallucinates. And I think the longest they've been able to go is like 31 hours in a session without it starting to hallucinate over a certain percentage. So thinking about that and having agents that should have state. If you think about an employee doing a job, they do have state, right? They've had it, and they also have ethics. You hope they have the right morals. They know the mission. There's so much that's stored inside of our brain. Now, all of a sudden, you have a non-human entity that's doing things that could hurt or help the organization, and it only has a limited amount of state. And I worry about that a lot, or like, long-term memory, if you will. And also access to the data. Is it skewed data? Is this data that we loaded? One of the things you hear about Notebook LM that Google has, where you load all your data in there. And one of the biggest reasons for that is it only uses the data inside there, so it doesn't hallucinate.
Yeah.
So I think and a lot of organizations, their data isn't set right. It's not in a data lake. You look at, they don't even have the data set up where they know what is sensitive data, like PHI, PII, all that information. So, granting access to data is going to create problems. So, and I know I threw a lot of pieces out there, but my point being is I just don't know how all that, as we mature, is gonna become focused on the mission and focused on getting the right outcomes, and versus how much do I really got to manage these agents? If I have to manage the agents as much as the employee, the only thing I'm really saving is their cost.
Yeah. Right.
Right? I'm not saving any of the soft costs. I'm only saving the hard costs, the payroll, et cetera, et cetera. And I may not be getting as good results. I don't know if you've heard, but a lot of these projects have failed.
Yes,
Right?
right.
Gartner came out and said a lot of these projects, AI and agentic AI, have failed, and a lot of it is around. If you read the article pretty deeply, it's really about not aligning it with goals, not being able to have evaluation criteria, not putting the right things in place, and then one thing I thought was really fascinating, not socializing it with the employees.
Exactly. Exactly. They always get that wrong. I don't know what it is around technological deployments. And I've seen this a lot, is that we spend a lot of money on the actual technology itself, but once you start to integrate it into the culture, into the society, and you spent so much little time with the people that are actually going to interact with it. The training and getting used to it is just as important. And then to your point, what exactly is this agentic AI agent supposed to be doing? What is the
Right.
goal?
Right.
It's kind of cool when we think about it. We, oh wow, that's that wow factor. But when it gets down to it, like you have a job, it has a job to do. And if it does that job very well, just like any roles and responsibilities, there's an outcome. There's usually a positive outcome. I think we need to, in my opinion, start looking at small use cases. Let's not let this thing out. Remember I said about, the child in the playground, the sandbox, and not let it all throughout the entire playground just yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's
Well,
let it
yeah.
grow
Well,
up.
I didn't even get into the auditability and trust exploitation part of this, right? Or the orchestration,
Yeah.
right? And with multi-agent, I mean, there's a lot to this, right? There's a lot to peel back, and just some of the things you and I've touched on. That's enough to make a lot of people scratch their head and say, well, maybe I don't have the data set up the way I need. Maybe it's not in a data lake or accessible, in the appropriate way. Maybe I don't have the safeguards or the guardrails in place, or, maybe I don't have the ability to audit, or I don't really know which employee should be this person in the middle, right? If they don't know anything, to your point, if we don't socialize it, if they don't understand it, how can they be the person in the middle?
Exactly. And they're not used to it. And everything it's new for everyone, not just for a few people. They're just getting used to AI, just LLM, use at scale, on a worldwide scale. And people are like, oh, okay, I see what I can get text. I can, consolidate emails. I can communicate at scale that I never could before.
Yeah.
Now you're asking it to do something more than that, and that's replacing certain workflows. And that's very, very important to really look at, because from my understanding of machines and what machines do, even though you have machine to machine learning, is that they're very rigid in how they do things. They're not very fluid. What I'm saying is, as far as scenarios change, variables change, they like very predictable future out, like, hey, if I know if I step one step forward, I can take one step back, one step forward, one step back. When you start changing that stuff around, it starts to get confused. I've seen my own AI get confused when I've given it information, and then it comes back. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, let me reset you, because you're way off on a tangent. Because to your point earlier, the way the AIs are kind of set up now, and I'm talking large language model, is that it even though it might not have the answer, it tries to get you an answer. Instead of saying, I really don't know what you're referring to. Can you help me with more information? So I'm like, it just tries to answer the question. That's a flaw that needs to be fixed as we go forward. Now, you've talked to some of these things around going into 2026. You published some predictions around this. What's the biggest single shift that leaders need to prepare for now if they don't want to be caught off guard?
Yeah, I think they really got to think about the use cases, and just like what you just pointed out, there's a lot to be said for human intuition. It plays a major role in your performance in the organization, your ability to react to, situations that are very dynamic, where agents just don't have that, especially like M2M, like, where they're doing that. So I think that, but, I think it's going to go back to that orchestration, audibility, and trust, right? We just got to figure out a way to make that. I've not seen a really good one yet that I like. Let me put it this way. One that I would trust my bank account to. One that I would trust if I was a CIO or CISO back at one of the big financial services that I worked for, that I would trust with Treasury, right? With wiring big chunks of money.
Yeah, right.
or things like that. And so the use cases now tend to be not as bold and broad as you hear Elon and so many others talk about it in this great big thing like robots and agents and all that out doing all this stuff for you. Well, even the travel one, which I think in my predictions, I mentioned that I really dislike the travel one, because I know what seats on different types of planes that I like, and I know where I'm sitting, and I may have a friend that I know is sitting there. If I have to put all that information in there, I could have just gone to the application and done it myself, probably faster. So I think what they do is they use these very high level abstract use cases that are very simplistic. But as far as like getting into ones where there's a lot of depth to it and human intuition plays a definitive role, that's a very difficult one to do. Very difficult. And I think we have ways to go before I think people are going to have that trust that you mentioned early on to say, go ahead and do that. I mean, how many people do you know are actually doing the travel saying, oh, go ahead and access my credit card and book it and do all that, and you had nothing to it? I don't know of anybody that crazy yet.
No, it's risk. It's a lot of risk. You're
A lot
putting
of
a
risk.
lot of risk with someone that really doesn't do it. So to your point, and the way I look at it as from an agentic AI model when it comes to deployment in my own business, I start looking at from the age before, which is the manufacturing age, when they started to put in automation into these plants, right? They started to do things that were simplistic, right? Just to, you know
Yeah.
what? Instead of having human beings sit there and turn a nut or a screw, I can put some automation in there, and that'll turn the screw. And I can take that human being, which is a very expensive part of my business. Labor is always the labor costs so high. I can put them to do something different. They don't have to sit there and do that. So I think if people start looking at what's in my business that is very predictable, number one,
Yes.
very, very, very simplistic in what it is, that then if I automated just that I can deploy that my most valuable resource somewhere else, like that the human. I always look into human AI, the HAI. I want to use my human as much as I can because they are far more advanced than any, as far as I can see, an agentic AI system there is.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, and yeah, just like you said, the monotonous and tedious tasks. If I can take those off the human, then I can have them work on higher purpose, higher evolution things that we have in the organization, right? Where I need human intuition, where I value it tremendously. That's really what I want to do anyway. I didn't know you very rarely hire somebody to go, man, I just want them to go do this tedious task every single day. I
right.
mean, there are places, but but a lot of the jobs that's not the case, and I think it's typical. Everybody used to always say Oracle and Microsoft, they market 9 months to a year ahead of the product, right? Which a lot of organizations do. I'm not just picking on them. Um, I think we're even further out before these agents, just based on even some of the conversation you and I've had here, to bring all this together along with the use cases and then build that trust. I don't think that's something that's going to happen overnight. And we're not really seeing anybody deploy any of these really high-end, difficult tasks, except there is one exception. I did want to mention that's where I was going with this to
Yep.
align with your question. Some of the manufacturers do have some pretty interesting tasks. I'll give you an example. If you look at CrowdStrike and Cisco,
Mhm.
they're in their AI defense parts of their products. The threat intelligence and being able to monitor millions of logs that used to be five, six, seven people on a team doing, and then picking out the 10 that are going to be problematic, and then
Yeah.
giving you additional information on those so you can act on those and provide that kind of intuitive information. There are agents that are able to do that. So and there are other use cases as well. So there are good use cases. So I think we should be optimistic about it. But I
Sure.
just think the timelines, in my mind, the timeline for affecting like the general populace is pretty far. We're still several years away.
No, what you said, it's all about the use case and what it can do, especially when you're crunching, large amounts of data. These data sets are fantastic. So use the AI for what it's really, really good at.
Yeah.
It's fantastic at math for the most part. So you can start to see, and then pointing out those anomalies in real time, I think very, very quickly, because you sit at that world of AI, cybersecurity, we've got to make sure these threats, because to your point, what is the board really concerned about? We want to make sure we maintain a good brand. that we are living up to our promise, and we do not need something disruptive like a cybersecurity breach. Think about the implications, Mark, of a conversation you now have to have with your board after deploying an agentic AI system that now just was hacked and now is causing you millions, potentially more than that, in dollars lost because of your brand reputation.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Getting it back takes years. So things like that, these really high value, the treasury example, some of these others, I think that your trust and brand one's a big one. It's going to take a while for that trust to build, and there's going to be some exploits that cause issues with agentic AI. They're going to get out in the public and scare everybody to death, just like we had with SolarWinds, just like we had with you can go down the list. There's so many of them. We're going to have that, and we haven't had it yet, and we will. And how we get through that, the safeguards and the auditing and the things they put in to help build that trust back to, that's going to be critical. And so that's why I believe, I did kind of put in some of my predictions that, there are use cases that will do well, but I do think there is going to be a lot of people questioning. And you think about it, it was the same with the internet. It was the same with cloud. How many people said, "I'm not going to pay $1,000 for a smartphone. I don't need it. I don't need to spend $1,000. What am I using a smartphone for?" Now, if you took it away from them, it's like a kid. It's like you took away one of their kids.
That's it. It's the dependency, the maturity of the tech of itself, and the use case. And we've got to up our game as human beings to operate in this world. And what that's going to look like. You can't just sit on the bench and it's doing everything for you. We've got to up our skill set. I always look at that. I call it the model of AI, which is at the data infrastructure layer, the information of itself. But then it starts to get into context and wisdom. We've got to understand as human beings. I believe that we've got to own that context layer and own the wisdom layer,
Yes.
understanding what this data and information is really means in situational awareness, in emotional intelligence, things that are I don't see that happening
No.
in an agentic AI model. But they're very important when you start to look at mature business models and things like that. Like, where does this really play in, and where really it shouldn't be playing in?
Well, yeah, I mean, I love where you went with that on the emotional intelligence and all that. So, you remember the movie Office Space, right?
Yeah.
And with the red stapler and all that. Well, what they did in there is they took a couple pennies out of every single transaction. Now, imagine that being an AI, right? Where they could even hide it more, right? They could choose only certain transactions they take a penny out of, where it'd be even less visible, less noticeable, less auditable, right? Rounding error, if you will. Those type of things are going to happen. And if you don't have some type of intuition or emotional intelligence or some way to evaluate that, if it's just straight up, it's probably going to get missed. Because they're going to put tolerances in there. I just think that's the kind of stuff. I totally agree with you. Without those pieces in place, without having some way to leverage that, maybe the person in the middle is able to do that. Maybe they fully understand the pieces, but what if that person leaves and somebody comes in? Do we have to wait 6 months? What happens during that 6 months? How long does it take I just think there's a lot of pieces like that, to your point, where we use intuition, experience, knowledge of the industry, et cetera, and making sure that all gets in an agent and in an applicable and usable way that we can audit. Wow. That's a lot. It's a lot.
A whole lot. And to your other point, where I love how you said, I could have just did that myself. Like, why?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hey, you can even do it as an insider threat. What if you're the one overwatching the agent and you have the pennies go into your account?
Right.
You just modify the agent or adjust the agent and you do it and nobody's watching you. So
Exactly.
how is all this? I just don't see a lot of use cases where people are using it to do financial transactions and things like that. You see a lot of AI looking at financial transactions for fraud, audit, blah blah blah. But as far as like just turning an autonomous agent asynchronously loose on the world
Yeah.
and with access to millions of dollars in a bank account, I'm not seeing those yet.
I don't have that kind of trust. I tell you, Mark, this has been an
No.
interesting, very good podcast interview. I really, really appreciate you coming on. Before I let you go, you got to let us know how to get in contact with you. What is the best way? Where you're working right now, and any other thoughts you'd like to leave us with.
Yeah, so you can go to marklynd.com, marklynd.com, and also on LinkedIn. I've got a pretty big presence on there. And then I have several books out. My latest is a leader's guidebook to cyber insurance, and I put that out there because a lot of people are getting declined in their coverage when they need it most. And there's a lot of rules and regs changed on that. Also have a fiction book out called Cyber War,
Yeah,
one scenario which has AI, quantum, and cyber in it. It's doing extremely
that's a
well
must
out
read.
there. Yeah, so and you can find all those at marklynd.com and LinkedIn. And if anybody in the audience wants to reach out to me, have at it. I talk to a lot of people, and it's always good to kind of have a well-rounded response and feedback scenario in place so you can understand what people. I love trying to figure out what people are worried about, what they're envisioning, what they're dreaming about, trying to figure out that where the market's going because it's like the conversation you and I are having. It's both exciting and scary at the same time.
It is. It's like a roller coaster ride,
It
right?
is. Absolutely.
It's going to be an interesting future as we go into it. I mean, there's a lot, but I'm hoping to see an awakening in human awareness and really understanding, okay, what can I get just automate as opposed to what's absolutely necessary for me as the human being, that the things that very, very difficult to simulate, things that you just talked about, just
Yeah.
plain intuition, emotional, just understanding the emotion, because emotion is not a logical thing. There's
No.
things beyond what we call logic that we really got to understand that's still very, very important in the human drama as we go forward in business and in just the general life. So it's gonna be interesting as this scenario plays itself out on the human drama.
Yeah, the one thing I leave with the Grant that I've
Yeah,
found fascinating, I get asked all the time, where do I start? In
yeah,
fact, that's probably the number one question I get all the time is where do I start? And I always say, look, take a simple use case, one that you can manage, one that you have oversight on, one that's auditable and aligned with the goals of the organization. And then take that win and that little win and build off that win. That it may be that you're going to use one of the AI tools built into one of your manufacturer's products that you already have deployed, right? And take that win and socialize that win and use that win to build more use cases. And so when you talk to people in the organization about, hey, there might be a use case here that aligns with the goals of what you're trying to accomplish that then build into the goals of the organization. Well, if you do that, having a simple set of wins behind you that you can point to, and then giving them that same kind of deal, wins build off each other. And boy, that's a great way to do it. It's a manageable way to do it. It's also one where if you go out there and try to do the big one right off the bat and it doesn't go well, you may not have a job. You may put
oh,
your team at
yeah,
risk. You
yeah.
you've blown all this money in the organization. It's just to me, I always tell them, I said, look, to hear this in a very positive way. That's a reckless way to do that, where when you have these easy wins from a positive aspect that you can go out and get today, right? And you get to those wins faster and earlier too. It's very much the low hanging fruit. And so that's what I always say. And I get asked that question almost every day.
And you got to do that though. You have to start small and understand the nuance I guarantee you, because like I said, me and Mark have been in technology a long time. The simplest thing, it seems simple, but in actuality, it becomes harder, and it becomes,
Yes.
oh, I didn't see that scenario. I didn't know it was going to do it like that. Oh, that's interesting. You learn a lot of things along that route, so that you don't want to then put it into what you call production, where it becomes highly visible, and then it's not. It hasn't been tested in a lot of different scenarios, and you run into a lot of risk. So you try to avoid that, right?
Well,
Now, I
think
got
about it
one
in the
more
Philadelphia Eagles. Think about it in the football, Philadelphia Eagles, for example.
Yeah,
You know, they started out the season and well, where they were 7-1 or something, or 7-2.
yeah.
Now, then they lost 3 in a row. Now they're back and they're going to win the East, and they're going to, be at home for the first playoff game. So if you're out there and you're a CIO or CISO, wouldn't you rather have 6 or 7 little wins under your belt, where if you have one loss, you're still going to qualify for the playoffs and you're still going to be at home?
Win
Right?
early. I love that. One last question, real simple question. You've been on a lot of different podcasts. You've been in a lot of different interviews. You've done a lot of these things. Your first experience on the Follow Brand podcast, how did you like your experience?
I enjoyed it very much. I like how dynamic it was. A lot of times I get you and I talked about that before we kicked off. I get the questions ahead of time, and it's already the outcome's already kind of done.
Yeah.
You and I were very dynamic, and we kind of went, we went here and there, but that's how people do it. That's what they want to hear. That's how they listen, right? That's how they have their conversations with their family and friends and coworkers. And so I very much enjoyed that, and I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, Mark. This has been wonderful. Thank you for being on the show. We want to thank Thinkers 360 for bringing us together, because we both got awards.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, they're great.
They are. They're fantastic. So I'm going to encourage your entire episode, or your entire audience, to tune in to all the episodes of Follow Brand. They can do so at 5-star BDM. That is the number 5. That is star, B for brand, D for development, Infomasters.com. I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you, Grant.
You're most welcome.
Man, who's your favorite podcaster? Man, Grant, man. I love Grant's podcast. Well, who's Grant? I'm going to send you the link. I love Grant.
I love the interview. I've done a lot of these, and this is a great one. It's always great to talk to people who know what they're doing, and it's clear you're a great host, and you've done this many times before.
I feel great that we're having this conversation here. Met a new person in business who I previously didn't know.
It was an amazing podcast. Grant is an amazing interviewer. I learned a lot.
Really enjoyed this. Great questions, great talk track. Super appreciate you having me on. It's been a very fun episode to talk about a lot of things that I don't always get to dive into. So this has been a fantastic conversation.
I wouldn't be where I am here today, of course, not on this stage. However, not in my current business projection and my current business model without working with you.
The difference between influence and legacy, it's the platform that carries your voice. You're not visible because you lack talent. You're visible because your brand doesn't speak. I've built 5-star BD&M to change that. Most leaders have the expertise, but not the presence, the vision, but not the vehicle. Across 3 cities, one brand is helping leaders rise above the noise. Here in the heart of Omaha, strategy isn't left to chance. It's engineered with precision. In Omaha, we engineered your Zachner brand, AI-powered, data-driven, precise. TISA went from a local nonprofit to a national speaker in 90 days. We don't guess your brand strategy, we build it. On the shores of St. Croix, your brand takes on depth and meaning, shaped through curated retreats and legacy experiences. In St. Croix, strategy becomes soul. Our retreats don't just refine your message, they rediscover your mission. One founder rewrote his entire company's story here. Funding followed 30 days later. This is where leaders remember who they were meant to be. In Vibrant Miami, momentum meets amplification, transforming your voice into a movement. In Miami, your brand becomes a movement. Business development accelerators, audience building. Joy came with an old website and an outdated company name, but she left with 5,000 followers and a waiting list. This is where you scale with soul. 3 cities, 1 mission, your legacy ignited. It started with a thread. Let's pull it together. Stop blending and start leading. 5-Star BDM, where legacy is engineered, embodied, and ignited. Visit 5starbdm.com and book your brand audit today.
Imagine standing at the edge of a new frontier where the boundaries of technology and human potential blur. This is the world of agentic AI, a realm where artificial intelligence doesn't just follow instructions but takes initiative, adapts, and collaborates with you to achieve extraordinary results. Picture a visionary consultant, someone who sees beyond the current landscape, guiding organizations through the complexities of digital transformation. Now, imagine harnessing the expertise of an AI technology expert, someone who understands not only the power of AI, but also how to deploy the right tech stack to bring your vision to life. The journey to creating an agentic AI production begins with a single question. What if your AI could do more than automate tasks? What if it could anticipate needs, solve problems creatively, and work alongside you as a true partner? This is not science fiction. It's the next evolution of artificial intelligence. Building an agentic AI system starts with a deep understanding of your goals. It's about aligning technology with your mission, ensuring that every tool and process serves a greater purpose. The right consultant will help you map out this journey, identifying opportunities where AI can make the biggest impact. Next comes the deployment of the tech stack. This is where expertise matters most. Choosing the right platforms, integrating advanced algorithms, and ensuring seamless communication between systems are all critical steps. An AI technology expert knows how to navigate these challenges, transforming complex requirements into a streamlined, effective solution. But the real magic happens when your AI becomes agentic, when it starts to learn from its environment, adapt to new situations, and collaborate with your team. It's no longer just a tool, it's a dynamic force that drives innovation and growth. Imagine your organization empowered by an AI that doesn't just react, but takes initiative. An AI that understands your objectives, anticipates challenges, and works tirelessly to help you succeed. This is the promise of agentic AI production. Are you ready to take the next step? With the guidance of a visionary consultant and the expertise of an AI technology expert, you can deploy the tech stack that will transform your business. The future of work is agentic, and it starts with a single decision. Begin your journey today. Unlock the full potential of AI and discover what's possible when technology becomes your most trusted ally. The next chapter of innovation is waiting for you. AI will not replace you. Someone using AI will. That is the reality facing anyone building a business, a career, or a legacy today. While most people are busy studying artificial intelligence, a select few are quietly building leverage, assets, and authority with it. This is not just theory. It is a candid conversation between Grant McGaugh and Kellen Coleman, two unconventional strategists who agree on one truth. If you refuse to learn AI, you risk being replaced by someone who does. As Kellen Coleman put it, if you refuse to learn AI, I'll replace you with a 12-year-old. That is not hype. That is a warning. AI does not create authority. Clarity does. Artificial intelligence simply scales what you already have. If you are clear on your value, AI can amplify your impact. Without clarity, no amount of technology will make you a leader. This episode breaks down the real gap between knowing and winning, visibility and revenue, certificates and contracts. Just because you know about AI or have a certificate does not mean you are winning in the marketplace. In the end, certificates do not win contracts. Relationships do. Every time building genuine connections is what sets true leaders apart in the AI age. If you want leverage, tune in, schnow, and decide which side of the AI divide you are on. What if leadership wasn't about titles, but trials? What if your breakthrough lay beyond fear? In First Light, The Brave Path to Authentic Leadership, embark on a journey of courage, truth, and purpose. Face the wolf. Hear first thunder. Wield the sword and shield. This is more than a book. It's a calling. Are you ready for First Light?
I want to thank everybody for coming out here and join our center here at the Enterprise on 96 and L. This is the grand opening of 5-Star BDM in Omaha, Nebraska, my hometown, and I can't wait to bring these services in healthcare, technology, and finance to all of you. Welcome to 5-Star BDM Studio. This is where we are making the Follow Brand Podcast TV series and the Follow Brand Podcast itself. This is where the magic happens. Thank you again for tuning into the Follow Brand Podcast. I am your host, Grant McGaw. We are going to feature those who are looking to scale and grow their business to the next level in the world of healthcare, the world of technology, and finance. I want to thank you all for tuning in week by week, because this is how we grow our brand to the highest level. I want to thank each and every one of you, first of all, for taking the time to share your vision, your ideas with us at 5-Star BDM, so we can take what you have and bring it to an ideal state. We want to focus on you. Welcome to the Follow Brand Podcast. Today we're going to talk about unleashing your visibility of value. One of the biggest problems that small business owners have is that their value is not visible. We change that for everyone. Now, for 5-Star BDM, and you're looking to be a client, you're looking to scale, you're looking to move yourself to a whole nother level, this is the way you do it. First, you book an appointment with me. You get a free consultation. We're going to talk about where you're currently at in your journey. We want to understand your brand assessment. From there, we start with the BRAVE framework. And the BRAVE framework that I have patented, I have a copyright and a trademark on. We're talking about brand identity. We're talking about resilience. We're talking about authenticity. And we are talking about visibility and execution. If this rings true for you, it'll ring true for your business. Hey everyone, it's Grant McGaw, CEO of 5-Star BDM and host of the award-winning Follow the Brand podcast and TV series, where I help you to build a 5-star brand that people will follow. My genius is personal brand development through intelligent communication and helping you achieve your business and career goals. I am a requested speaker on digital technology and brand development issues. I want to work with you to increase the value of your current opportunities while attracting new ones. Every one of you is unique, and we all share challenges that can be addressed through smart branding. As a super connector, I worked with you as an executive coach to guide you along the complicated business and career development road, providing the enhancement tools and information you need to succeed. Together, I will help you succeed in today's challenging business climate. I will evaluate and measure your progress. Best of all, I am right alongside you every step of the way. Build the brand called you. Genius is coming. Tune in for our next show or click on our website at www.5starbdm/followthebrandtv. Thank you.